Before we begin, you can watch on Zoom or Facebook Live. You can send your questions using the Q&A feature on Zoom, and we'll answer those at the end, like I said. A recording will be available within 48 hours, and you can sign up for future updates on our future webinars at yubawater.org. So today's speaker, my name is Bonnie Dixon. I'm a Senior Public Information Officer here at Yuba Water Agency. And we have Karl Parker and Adam Robin talking to you today about our hydropower operations and how they benefit California's clean energy goals and Yuba County. So Karl is our operations manager, and in that position, he makes sure that we have safe, reliable, and environmentally compliant operations. And he has more than 15 years of experience as a hydro operator, power plant technician, and pipeline operator with Yuba Water Agency, Pacific Gas and Electric, and Calpine. Adam is our government relations manager, where he engages with state and federal elected officials and agencies to advance our missions and benefit the people of Yuba County. Before joining Yuba Water Agency, Adam served as a legislative affairs director with the Northern California Water Association. He's a graduate of UC Davis Law School and UC Berkeley. So today's agenda, we are going to start with a quick overview of Yuba Water Agency, a little bit about who we are and what we do. And then we'll dive into what is hydropower, how does hydropower work? And talk a little bit about the history of hydropower here in Yuba County. There's some cool local history that Karl is going to talk about. And then we'll also talk about our operations specifically, and then shift to how hydropower benefits the state's clean energy goals, and how hydropower benefits Yuba County. And again, like I said, we will hold questions until the end, but please feel free to drop any questions that you have into the Q&A box. So with that, I will pass it over to Karl Parker to get us started. Go ahead, Karl.
Thank you, Bonnie. Before I get started talking about hydropower here at Yuba Water, I really want to kind of focus a little bit on the agency's mission areas and how hydropower supports us in those mission areas. So in 1959, Yuba Water Agency was formed with the primary goal of flood risk reduction and maintaining a sustainable water supply for the residents of Yuba County. Also, our missions include hydropower generation, which we'll go into a little more detail later, but that's really the foundation that enables us to accomplish these other mission areas. Another major part of our mission is fishery protection and enhancement. Our watershed was affected greatly back during the hydraulic mining days, and one of our main goals as an agency is to improve the fishery downstream. And then recreation. New Bullards Bar is a beautiful reservoir, less than an hour away from Marysville. Provides wonderful recreation opportunities for the residents of Yuba County and the whole surrounding area. If you've never been, I highly recommend you go out, spend a weekend on the lake, and enjoy what we offer. The facilities I'm going to talk about today are all located on the Yuba River, most of them right here in Yuba County. And so for people not familiar with our watershed, the Yuba River is comprised of three forks. You have the North Yuba, which flows into New Bullards Bar Reservoir. You have the Middle Yuba, which combines with the North Fork just downstream of the reservoir. And then you have the South Fork, which combines with the North and the Middle Fork, right around Eagle Bright Dam. Those three forks combined together flow downstream into what we call the Lower Yuba River, which is a river that flows past Marysville, combines with the Feather River, which is a major tributary for the Sacramento River. We have a quick little video here that we're going to show you, kind of introducing you to hydropower and the role it plays in our mission and our goals here at Yuba Water Agency.
This is a story of opportunity more than half a century in the making, then and now, flowing from hydropower.
I think of the hydro generation as the building block to provide for the community.
Hydropower revenue provided financial footing for Yuba Water Agency to build New Bullards Bar Dam. After a 50-year agreement with PG&E ended, that revenue now stays right here in Yuba County.
The founders of the water agency had vision, and they saw the opportunity that would be out there. Yeah, it was going to be 50 years away, but they knew that it was going to happen. And here we are today, determining just how to invest those revenues into the community.
Hydropower is at the heart of how we support our community. Water flows from New Bullard's Bar through a nearly 5-mile tunnel, then through this penstock to New Colgate Powerhouse. Electricity is generated here and at 2 other powerhouses downstream. More than 400 megawatts of carbon-free power, helping California meet its clean energy goals.
All our powerhouses can be made available when solar and wind are not, and they can be online within minutes. It's a real flexible source of energy. So the power we produce here, we sell in the open market. The revenue we make off of that, in turn, gets put back in the community.
Thanks to that revenue, Yuba Water is able to make widespread investments in improving water infrastructure, watershed health, and flood risk reduction.
It's critical for economic development in this area, and they have committed to millions of dollars. Yuba Water Agency is providing a critical service to Yuba County.
And we're using that same revenue to invest in our leaders of tomorrow.
We're going to see benefits to our education system, both in curriculum and in facilities. And our students are going to be actually out on the river in rafts, learning about the salmon and the bugs and the life cycles. They're going to learn about the history of hydraulic mining in the area. They're going to learn about the history of the water agency and what it took to get to where we are today.
The thing I want to emphasize is that Yuba Water Agency really is a catalyst for change. To me, that gives me hope. It gives me hope of what is good and what is possible when people come together. So when I'm talking about a catalyst, what I'm talking about is that under the leadership of the Yuba Water Agency, we're able to bring in key individuals from the community. I always like to say that no one is as smart as all of us, and that really plays out here.
In the past, hydropower revenue built our water supply and reduced the risk of flooding. Today, it's powering the possibility of our future.
It's very rewarding. You come to work every day knowing what we're doing behind me is having an effect on the community.
It's incredibly significant. I don't even think some of us can even fathom the significance of what Yuba Water Agency means to Yuba County. We're in for really bright days here in Yuba County.
A big takeaway I'd like you to take from that video is really the fundamental truth that our hydropower and the revenue that produces is what enables us as an agency to accomplish all the various missions that we have and really to benefit the people of Yuba County. So now that we introduced how hydropower benefits the agency and it's part of this fundamental system that allows us to accomplish these missions, I'm going to try and explain a little bit about what hydropower is. So simply put, hydropower is the energy found in moving water. And so a good way to think about that, it's kind of easy to look at a river and it's flowing by and you don't really appreciate the power that's there. But if you look at like Grand Canyon, I mean, that canyon was carved by the potential energy found in the water flowing downstream. And so a hydroelectric facility, basically put, this little diagram, you're going to have a dam, and that dam holds back water, which then increases the elevation of that water relative to the river downstream. That water then will flow through what's called a penstock. It's basically a pipe or a tunnel all the way to your turbine. And your turbine then captures the potential energy found in that water that's being pulled down by gravity into mechanical energy, and it starts to spin. And as it spins, it's connected to a generator, which is also spinning. And that generator converts that mechanical energy into electrical energy, which then is transmitted via transmission lines out onto the grid and supplies all the end users. An important thing I'd like to note is the water going through this facility comes out just like it goes in. We pull out the potential energy, and that's it. The water is not changed. It's not polluted in any way. It's really a clean energy source where we just harness the energy that gravity provides in the water itself to benefit all of us. Important thing to note, Yuba Water Agency is not a utility. We don't supply power directly to consumers. We sell our power to CAISO, which is the California independent system operator who brokers power to about 80% of California's grid. And that's an important distinction. A lot of people say, hey, we got this power right here in Yuba County. Why can't I buy my power from you versus PG&E? And we're not set up to do that. It's a different role entirely. So I'm going to talk about megawatts, and in the power industry, that's pretty commonplace. That's a unit of measurement that we use all the time. But outside of the power industry, most people don't use that term or even think about it. You might be more familiar with a kilowatt, or if you look at your PG&E or other utility bill, you'll see kilowatt hours on it, and that's a 1,000 watts of power. Whereas a megawatt's 1,000,000 watts. So we're talking a drastically different scale than what you're used to at home. And our facilities produce about 417 megawatts as their peak capability. And that's enough power for over 400,000 homes. Just to give you a little perspective of the amount of energy we're talking about. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of hydropower in Yuba County. We have a really rich and unique history when it comes to power production here in Yuba County, hydropower production. So the first Colgate Powerhouse project was built in 1899 and delivered power first to the Sacramento area, and then that power was further transmitted on to the streetcars of Oakland. Yuba Electric Power Company, which built Colgate Powerhouse, was eventually combined with some other power companies to form what we know as Pacific Gas and Electric Company, which we're all familiar with. Being one of the largest private utilities ever formed. So the Colgate Powerhouse, here on the left side, you're seeing the original powerhouse that was built. Ended up burning down in 1946, and a replacement powerhouse, which is referred to as Colgate Powerhouse, was built in 1949. Colgate Powerhouse, the building is still standing. We use it now as office and shop space as an agency. That's where my office is located. And it's just upstream of the new powerhouse. Kind of an interesting thing to point about Colgate Powerhouse is it gets its name from Romulus Colgate, the grandson of the Colgate that started Colgate Soap and Perfume Company. So if you've used Colgate toothpaste, that's the same company. It's changed management over the years, of course. But it's just kind of an interesting bit of history. I remember when I first started working here, I mentioned I was going to be working at Colgate Powerhouse, and my oldest boy at the time is about 6, runs to the bathroom, comes back with a tube of Colgate toothpaste. He thought that was kind of fun. Something I'll point out is, we were formed in 1959. There was a major flood in 1955, and the residents of Yuba County came together, and by 1959 they'd formed the Yuba County Water Agency. And in 1961, the voters of Yuba County approved this ambitious project, building this huge dam, building this power plant, and the whole system associated with it to reduce the risk of further floods, and to help ensure a reliable water supply. But the hydropower is what allowed that project to happen. So I mentioned PG&E earlier on. PG&E was a key player in this, in that we, in exchange for PG&E paying for the bonds, or a good way to think is the mortgage for this project, we allowed them to collect all the revenue from the hydropower for the first 50 years. And that project ended, or that contract ended in 2016. And for the first time, Yuba Water Agency was able to keep those revenues in-house and be able to use them to invest in Yuba County. Another little fun bit of history is I want to talk about what's called a Pelton wheel. It's the style of turbine that we have at the new Colgate Powerhouse. But interesting fact is the Pelton wheel was invented just 18 miles from that powerhouse by Lester Allen Pelton. You go up to Camptonville, and there's this little monument you see here on the right. Just kind of a really interesting way that kind of made full circle and ended up benefiting the people right here in Yuba County again. At the time, new Colgate Powerhouse's Pelton wheels were installed. They were the largest one-piece cast wheels produced. They're 18 feet in diameter. They're massive. I think we have another picture here that gives you an idea of the size of these turbines. Next slide. Thanks. So I'm going to kind of explain our project in a little more detail, where everything's located, how it works. It's tied together in the Yuba River. So upstream, we have our house dam that's on the middle Yuba River. And it's a diversion dam. It doesn't produce any power, but what we do is when there's high flows in the middle Yuba, we're able to divert some of that flow over towards New Bullards Bar. And so water flows through a tunnel right there by our house dam over to just upstream of Log Cabin Dam, which is on Oregon Creek. And it's the same situation at Log Cabin. No power is produced, but we're able to divert excess flows all the way over to New Bullards Bar Reservoir, which helps us to keep New Bullards Bar full. And then we have our dam, New Bullards Bar Dam. It's really the gem of our project. Fifth tallest dam in the United States, second tallest in California, just behind Oroville. It was completed in 1970. And it stores nearly 1 million acre-feet of water. And that's an impressive amount of water. The reservoir itself is really deep and long. And it's been a wonderful resource for us here as a county. Something I'd like to point out is we maintain 170,000 acre-feet of flood storage space during the height of the rainy season to help us have more space to handle floods and to really focus in on that mission of flood risk reduction. So the water there at New Bullards Bar travels via tunnel 5 miles downstream and drops about 1,300 feet, a little over 1,300 feet down to New Colgate Powerhouse. And that water is what supplies New Colgate Powerhouse and allows us to generate the electricity we produce. So this is the first part of the system that actually generates electricity that I wanted to point out. And that water, that New Colgate Powerhouse, flows downstream into Englebright Lake, as mentioned earlier. And downstream of Englebright, which is a reservoir operated by Army Corps of Engineers, we have 2 more powerhouses, Narrows 2 Powerhouse and Narrows 1 Powerhouse, which then take the same water that went through New Colgate, and we generate electricity off it again downstream of that dam. That water then flows down the Yuba River, onto the Feather River, onto the Sacramento, like I mentioned earlier. Yeah. I was going to point out, for the last 50 years, PG&E has been reaping kind of the profits from this project. And, now that they've repaid, $185 million in bonds, and now that we have all this revenue in-house, it's really allowed us to really start investing in the county and accomplishing these mission areas that we have. So this slide shows a close-up image of our 3 main powerhouses. On the left, you have New Colgate Powerhouse, which combined produces 350 megawatts at peak capability. Those are those 2 Pelton wheels I talked about. I mentioned, that this powerhouse is over 1,300 feet below the elevation of the dam. That provides a lot of pressure in that water. So there's a lot of potential energy in the water entering this plant. And so we're able to extract a lot of power from a set volume of water. And that same water flows downstream and goes to the Narrows 1 and Narrows 2. And you'll notice those 2 produce significantly less power than New Colgate Powerhouse. And that's because that design of power plant is designed for lower pressure, higher flows. And so I kind of wanted to point out how New Colgate Powerhouse is incredibly efficient. We were able to produce a lot of power with the same amount of water that you're seeing flow through Narrows 1 and Narrows 2. And it's really a wonderful asset to have as an agency. Combined, our 3 facilities can produce up to 417 megawatts, which is a significant amount of power, and provides the revenues that we use to support all our other mission areas as an agency. And one other thing I'd point out is right at the dam there is a small powerhouse. It's called our fish release, and it provides water flows for the fishery downstream of the dam directly. And one of the real benefits of that is if there's a PG&E power outage, we can use that little power house to power the dam and operate the spill gates at the dam if needed. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Adam. He's going to talk a little more about how hydropower fits into the bigger picture of clean energy here in California.
Hey, thanks, Karl, for all that great background on hydropower, Yuba Water Agency's facilities, as well as the state's grid. As Karl explained, one of the big benefits of hydropower is that it's a clean, zero carbon energy resource that can quickly ramp generation up and down, which means it's capable of responding in real time to support grid reliability here in California. And that's really important, especially given California's ambitious and interrelated energy goals. On the one hand, ensuring that the grid is reliable and meets the needs of Californians, and on the other hand, accelerating the development and use of renewable energy resources like solar and wind. So here's a quick video that breaks some of that down.
California's clean energy future will only be possible if it includes the earliest and cleanest energy source of all, hydropower. To achieve a 100% carbon-free, renewable, and reliable energy grid by 2045, hydropower will play an essential role, filling in the gaps for California's residents and businesses when solar and wind facilities are offline or unable to keep up.
For a second night in a row, many California communities left in the dark again as massive power outages wiped out electricity grids.
When rolling blackouts hit during record heat in the summer of 2020, it was hydropower that helped stabilize California's grid.
At the time that the crisis occurred, CAISO actually called our control room and said, "What can you give us?" So it really did make a significant difference in the state. But the truth is we do this all the time, 365 days a year.
Well, if California is going to meet its 100% clean energy goal, then hydropower absolutely has to be in the mix. It's flexible, adaptable, it's sensitive to changes in demand. It doesn't matter whether the wind is blowing or the sun is shining, it's available.
Yuba Water Agency's hydro generation facilities are uniquely situated to support the state's climate change response and keep California's lights on.
All our powerhouses can be made available when solar and wind are not. It's a real flexible source of energy.
They call us, we deliver. It's as simple as that.
Yuba Water's new Colgate powerhouse and Narrow's 1 and 2 powerhouses generate more than 400 megawatts of energy, enough for more than 400,000 homes. Colgate Powerhouse ramps up or down on short notice, providing real-time flexibility and sustained generation to support grid reliability. No other clean energy source gets up and running this fast, responding instantly, generating at full power within just 8 minutes. When weather conditions cause solar and wind output to decline, New Bullards Bar Reservoir acts as a large energy reserve, allowing Colgate Powerhouse to deliver energy on demand.
We can go up, we can go down on a dime, and it makes a big difference in California.
For Yuba Water, hydropower not only serves the state's needs, but the revenue we receive by selling power on the open market provides powerful benefits to our community.
That revenue is important because that's the revenue we use to invest back in the community for all of the programs that we do in the county, like water education, flood risk reduction, watershed health, to lift up the community of Yuba County.
So as we all know, the sun doesn't always shine in California. The wind doesn't always blow in California. Hydro, that water is here for us. We can generate and we can be flexible and we can really meet the needs of California.
I'm now going to take just a few minutes to describe specifically where Yuba Water and hydropower generally fall in California's overall energy generation resource blend, as well as explain how hydropower fits into California's long-term vision and policy framework for reliable zero-carbon energy. First, on reliability. At the end of the day, a reliable grid requires that there are energy supplies sufficient to meet the demands of 40 million Californians and the 5th largest economy in the world, which is driven by industries like tech, manufacturing, and agriculture, all of which depend on a reliable grid. So what you see on the screen here is a map that was produced by the California Energy Commission, which details the different types and amount of energy produced in different types of generation facilities across the state. You'll notice that generally, hydropower resources, those are the blue circles, are clustered along the west slope of the Sierra Nevada, and our facility is sort of nestled in the middle of that. You can also see that generation of renewables like solar and wind, those are the green circles, are located across the state. So taken together, all of these resources, all of the circles on the map, support the grid. And when you look at the numbers that are broken out in the middle of the slide, you can see that in terms of overall generation, renewables and natural gas provide the majority of generation statewide. So where does that leave hydropower? Averaged over time, and the numbers on this slide are total generation over 1 year, hydropower is a little less than 10% of the state's overall generation in a given year, with Yuba Water generating about 10% of that. But as we've learned, hydropower provides an essential function in supporting overall grid reliability as a zero carbon complement to renewable resources like wind and solar, as it has the flexibility and scale to integrate those more variable resources into the grid. So here's what that looks like in real time. Next slide, please. So this graph shows what California's generation resource blend looks like over the course of a given day. In this case, this is what yesterday looked like. The different color lines on this graph represent different types of generation over time. So as we move left to right along the x-axis, that's sort of the hours within the day. And you can see, for example, the green line, which is renewables, primarily solar and wind resources. You can see how the line jumps up in the morning when the sun rises and solar generation comes online, and then falls again around sunset. You can also see how the blue line, those are large hydropower resources like Yuba Water's Colgate units, increase their output when those renewable resources decrease and aren't available to help support the grid. So by working together, these zero carbon resources, large hydropower and renewables like wind and solar, provide a foundation for California to pursue its other big goal, which is accelerating the development and use of renewable energy resources. Next slide, please. The framework for that California's clean energy future was created in 2018 when the state legislature enacted, and then Governor Jerry Brown signed, Senate Bill 100. SB 100 established a landmark policy requiring that renewable energy and zero carbon resources supply 100% of electric retail sales to end-use customers by the year 2045. It also codified interim goals for renewable generation, adaptation, and integration into the grid between now and 2045. So for example, if we jump to the next slide, under SB 100, 60% of retail energy must come from renewable resources by 2030, and 100% of must come from zero carbon resources by 2045. This SB 100 framework is really significant for Yuba Water because under SB 100, renewable resources that count towards the 60% renewable portfolio standard target do not include large hydro, which is defined as hydropower with a capacity greater than 30 megawatts. Based on what Karl told us earlier, that means that Colgate and Narrows 2 are zero carbon, but not renewable, while our Narrows 1 resource at 12 megawatts is both zero carbon and renewable. In spite of those distinctions, there's an important place for large hydro in California's vision for 100% renewable and zero carbon energy in 2045 and beyond. Just last year, the state released a multi-agency report which recognizes large hydropower as a zero carbon firm resource, which they define as, quote, generating resources that can generate electricity at any given time. And that's in contrast to other renewables that have those variable characteristics that we talked about earlier. The report demonstrates that large hydro has a really important role to play in implementation of SB 100 now and into the future, up to 2045 and beyond. This critical function of hydropower was also emphasized in a recent uncommon dialogue convened by Stanford University, where a diverse coalition of hydropower interests, conservation and environmental organizations, and government agencies recognize the role of hydropower as providing a foundation for other renewable resources. Quoting from the report, to rapidly and substantially decarbonize the nation's electricity system, the parties recognize the role that hydropower plays as an important renewable energy resource and for integrating variable solar and wind power into the U.S. electric grid. So hydropower, particularly resources with the scale and flexibility of Yuba Water Agencies, have a very important role to play as California works to advance those ambitious and interrelated energy goals of ensuring grid reliability and also accelerating the development and use of renewable energy resources. And as Karl described earlier, by selling power directly into the CAISO wholesale market, Yuba Water is able to both support the state's energy goals and generate a significant source of revenue to support our mission. So since the end of the 50-year power purchase agreement with PG&E in 2016, Yuba Water's average power sales have been just under $50 million a year. And that revenue amount is mainly contingent on two factors: energy prices and the amount of water available to produce hydropower. Yuba Water reinvests that revenue right back here in Yuba County, back into our communities through programs and projects that reduce flood risk, ensure reliable water supplies, and reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfire in our watershed, and so much more. And while the bulk of that revenue is dedicated to funding Yuba Water's core operations, mission, and mandates, our board has also committed to investing $10 million a year into a community impact grant program. Nonprofits, tribal governments, and other local agencies can apply for grants to fund projects or programs that have a direct connection to our mission areas. So this slide shows a breakdown of where those community impact grants have been issued since 2016. And again, I just want to emphasize, this is in addition to the millions of dollars that we spend directly each year on advancing our mission areas. So in closing, we really hope that today's presentation has helped you to develop a deeper understanding and appreciation for hydropower and the many benefits it provides. To recap, here are some of the key takeaways from today's webinar. First of all, hydro is clean, flexible, and reliable. Second of all, Yuba Water Agency's operations are uniquely positioned to help meet and advance California's clean energy needs and goals. And finally, Yuba Water's power sales revenue is reinvested back into Yuba County through community impact grant programs and projects that reduce flood risk, ensure reliable water supply, and so much more. Back over to you, Bonnie.
Thank you so much, Adam and Karl. That was really wonderful. I'm gonna go ahead and leave it on our takeaway slide as we dive into a few of the questions that we received during the presentation. So thank you again for all of that information. So a few questions that came in. Adam, I think we talked about this briefly, but could we again revisit large hydro as renewable? It's National Hydropower Day. There's a lot of conversation online right now as hydropower as a renewable resource. Can you talk more about how California defines hydro as renewable?
Yeah, sure. So SB 100 is California's policy framework for achieving what state law defines as our clean energy goals. Hydropower, small hydropower, so hydropower of less than 30 megawatts is categorized as renewable for purposes of the renewable portfolio standard here in California, while hydropower of 30 megawatts or greater is not. That is not a technical distinction. That's not a physical distinction. That's a policy distinction. And it's one that California lawmakers arrived at by weighing a variety of factors, including, I think most significantly back in 2018, potential incentives for the development of new large hydropower resources in California. So that's what it is. It's a policy distinction. It's not a technical distinction. Other states have different frameworks. For example, other states in the Pacific Northwest categorize all hydropower as renewable. As an industry, I think that's generally the trend. But here in California, we treat things a little bit differently. And at this point, that is a fairly well-defined and entrenched feature of California law.
Great, thank you. And a couple of questions about how drought is affecting hydropower. Karl, maybe you want to tackle that one first. So as far as water supplies go and drought goes, how is that affecting hydropower, it sounds like, in general, and our hydropower operations?
That's a great question. I mean, everyone's aware of the multi-year drought that we're witnessing here in the West. I'm sure people have seen headlines, where the power output at, Hoover Dam has been greatly reduced. Here at Yuba Water, we're in a unique position in that we have a highly productive watershed that's really how we came to be because we're having all these floods coming down the Yuba River. So currently our reservoir is at 103% of normal for this time of year, about 72% of our total capacity. But we're well aware of the impact that drought's having on water supplies. And so we're positioned in a way with the Colgate Powerhouse to maximize the benefits we can get from hydropower using the water that we have. So, I mean, we're in a good position, at Yuba County, but it is something that, everyone's concerned about. Everyone's worried about the water supply here in California and the West. But currently we're well positioned, and it's something that, we are mindful of in our operation. We don't take any of the water for granted.
And to piggyback off of that, some other questions about how do we anticipate any water rationing or water conservation rules? So anything to add about how maybe water shortages or projected water shortages, how do we kind of respond to that?
Currently for us, we don't supply water directly to consumers. And so that's not something that we directly are taking a part in, but we are positioned, I mentioned before, where we have this water in a reservoir to be able to transfer some of our water to other users. And, one of the things that we do as an agency is we supply groundwater to replace water that would be pumped out of the aquifers to maintain a healthy aquifer here in Yuba County. It's one of the unique things that we do that really has a great impact on the community.
Great. Let's see. Okay, so some other questions. How does water management at the state level affect our hydropower operations? And I think, Karl, you just spoke to that as far as our conjunctive use or groundwater management, and that we're not a water supplier for customers per se, for residential water supply. But is there anything else we want to add about kind of statewide water management, Adam or Karl?
I'll just add, I think Karl was right on earlier. I mean, our project has associated water rights. We recognize that we're part of a broader system, and there are certainly, in response to unprecedented dry conditions, the state is taking many actions, ensuring that the viability of our resources sort of accounted for in those processes is a big part of what we do, and just ensuring that we can continue to provide the benefits not only to folks here in Yuba County, but also for folks around the state is an important part of sort of the landscape that we navigate through, which is always changing in real time. Whether it's wet years or dry years, we're working to ensure that we're maximizing the benefits, the many benefits associated with the project.
Great. Another question on how many people work on our hydro operations and what kind of training and education do you need to get involved in something like that?
I can take that one, Bonnie. Our hydro operations department, we have 10 operators that are operating this project. And at any given time, there's always an operator at New Colgate Powerhouse. So 24/7, 365, there's somebody sitting there ensuring that we're staying compliant with all of our regulations, protecting the environment, and supplying power as needed. As far as, how do you get into this industry and become an operator? There's various ways, but it's not a career that you typically enter after going to school, right? I mean, some of us have degrees, but most of us don't as operators. It's typically an apprenticeship, through a bigger agency. We've actually created a operator trainee program here at Yuba Water Agency. We currently have 2 operators that are being trained to operate our project. So yeah, it's a true trade, and there's not a lot of talk about trades anymore, but that's one of the benefits that this agency provides is wonderful careers for people in our community that otherwise wouldn't exist.
Great, thank you. One more question, and we've got time for a few more questions, I think.
Hey, Bonnie, I'm going to interrupt.
Sure.
I explained about operators, but I want to point out that, this operation as a whole requires everybody at the agency. And so working there with a team of operators, we have all of our maintenance staff. They're the ones fixing everything, keeping it running, maintaining it. And on top of that, we have all the support staff, in Marysville and throughout the agency that really enables the operations department to operate our facilities and, ensure this benefit exists for the county.
Great. One more question that just came in. Can you talk about your relationships and collaboration with other location and power agencies like PCWA, NID, et cetera? Great question.
That is a great question. We don't have a whole lot of interaction with some of our other agencies, in day-to-day activities. One relationship I really want to point out is, after the floods in '99, it was recognized that we need better coordination between our water releases and the water releases from the State Water Project there in Oroville. And so we developed a program where the operators at our powerhouses and their powerhouses coordinate our water releases to minimize downstream impacts and do our best to protect the communities that we all care about.
What about PG&E? Any interaction with PG&E since they've got a long history in the area?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I mean, that image you're seeing right there on the slide, shows our new Colgate powerhouse, and you see this switch yard, which is electrical lines kind of behind the powerhouse. PG&E owns most of that equipment still. So there's a lot of coordination between us and PG&E. Their employees will come in, access their equipment. We'll operate some of their equipment for them at times. So there's still a lot of interaction between us and PG&E. We have a shared facilities agreement where we've kind of delineated who owns what and who's in charge of what. But that relationship is critical. We tie into PG&E's transmission lines. That's a relationship we want to keep going forward.
And I think that was our last question. So before we wrap up, Adam, Karl, anything else you want to offer from today's webinar? Any follow-up, last final thoughts to those questions?
Happy Hydropower Day, everybody.
No, I just second that. I appreciate everyone's time. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. I hope you learned something from us, and really appreciate you all joining us today.
Wonderful. So thank you again, everybody, for tuning in. Encourage everybody to follow us on social media and visit our website at yubawater.org. If you would like to stay in the know for future webinars, news, updates, etc., you can take a photo of this QR code and that will take you directly to our newsletter subscription page, or head on over to our website. But yeah, you can definitely sign up for future updates. And if you register for this webinar, you will also receive a copy of it, a recording of the webinar. So keep an eye out for that in the next 48 hours. And as Adam and Karl said, happy National Hydropower Day. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.